Hello. This is an interview with Bone Golem, the creator of DeepFreeze.it, and we'll be talking about his website, and I will be asking him some questions that have been brought up in response. Um, Bone Golem, do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
Okay, I guess. I'm just. There's nothing very interesting to say, though. I'm just one of the several people that have been. They were hanging around on 4chan's V board when this whole mess started, and I just did my. I just did my part when we start. When the Gamers of Dead articles have hit, I've like many have started participating in this. In this consumer revolt, and this later I specialized my role in making infographics, collecting and putting together information, rather than finding out information in making it more accessible through infographics, and eventually, basically, after seeing a couple of posts that I threw out this idea that was an operation that Oliver Campbell had started out a few months before to gather all the information about the corruption and put it somewhere accessible. I sort of saw a couple of posts that sounded interesting, and threw out the idea on then 8chan's V board. This idea got a lot of traction, so I saw the idea of making a website that listed the information that got found out, not strictly the ethical violation, also the acts of sensationalism, acts of everything, as the site's tagline says, all the information required to make an informed decision to decide if you should trust a journalist or not. Basically, everything I thought was interesting to know about the journalist, since in digging infographics, I told you I was going to make a fool of myself.
No, you're good. I got that. So what you're saying is that when you made the website, you not only wanted to put down what ethical violations were proven, but also show when there's an appearance of a conflict of interest, or when the ponderance of evidence would suggest that there was some sort of a unethical breach. Correct?
Well, the specified intent of the site is simply to provide all the information required to make an informed choice about what outlets and sources to trust. This includes all ethical violations, but does not necessarily mean that everything on the site is an ethical violation. It could be something that is on the fence, something that is not strictly a violation of ethics, but is something that makes me that I would like to know before, and I think other people would like to know before making an informed decision. For instance, there's an emblem I've never given for this, but theoretically, one of the emblems I have on the site, the censorship emblem, can be assigned for people who profess a pro-censorship attitude. There's no emblem on the site that actually has been given for that this far, and I'm honestly not very hot about that specific emblem. I'm seriously considering removing it, but that's to explain what I mean. A stance, an opinion on censorship is not strictly a violation of ethics, but it is information that is valid. A similar website that have been shown that track journalists sometimes have full pages of information about their political orientation, explaining how they are not reliable because they are liberal or conservative, or I don't know anything about American politics. So for me, it's all it's mostly gibberish. But I think you can see the idea. If he has no political orientation, nor does he plan to gain one at any point, but
Well, when it comes to people's political biases, don't believe that the particular political bias will have an influence on the journalistic. Let me rephrase that because I think it started that sentence off wrong. When it comes to political biases, everyone's going to have one. It's a question of whether or not they can separate their political biases from their reporting. If they can't do that, then that's a clear case where they're trying to push some sort of an agenda. And
I completely agree. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But let me segue into some of the questions I have written down for you. Some of these questions have been I asked around to see people that have been wanting to question certain things about the site and to address certain concerns they had. Other things I found online, reading through, watching some videos, reading posts on forums and such, and just taking a look at the site myself in general. So the first of these questions would be, one of the most controversial entries on the website would be the inclusion of Arthur Gies. Now, I saw that you had made a Reddit post about this, and you addressed, and in the Reddit post you said that the reason why he was included was because, not necessarily because Arthur Gies gave Bayonetta a low score for, sorry, Bayonetta 2 a low score, but because he gave the low score for the apparent reason of sensationalism. Can you explain what you mean by an apparent reason of sensationalism? Because I don't believe many people see that necessarily as the motive being clear for the low score.
First, I'm sorry that if I go off a tangent, I would like to just do. A lot of people are giving me this very flattering criticism that this sensationalism is not an ethical impropriety. That is I think it is very flattering. It's like I made a cake, and I was told, well, this cake, no professional baker would ever make this cake using this specific flour. You're criticizing me, but on the other hand, I'm happy that you're seeing it as you're telling me you're mistaking my cake for the work of a professional baker. So people are, as we said before, confusing the fact that maybe, I don't know. So people seem to be confusing the fact that there's an entry for that on the site with the fact that I consider it an ethical violation. That is not technically an ethical violation. It is something that sounds interesting to, I think is relevant information to make an informed decision about Gies. That's the, also all people who are criticizing this are criticizing Gies and not Riando because the anti-Gamergate people are trying to make it sound like every ant is like that. They use Gies as an example, as this happens to be his only emblem at the moment. If they use that, they did that with Riando shit,
don't get me wrong. I don't believe that every entry is like this. This is just one of the most. This one was the most controversial.
Speaking, getting to the point. I'm sorry if I ramble on the. I tend to do that. This will be another problem, along with the fact that I don't understand when I'm supposed to speak and when I'm supposed to wait for you, and I keep speaking over you. This will be one of the many problems we have. As I was saying, the entry was not phrased very well originally, and has been yesterday when I made an update to the site. It has been silently, completely rewritten. Now it is much more clear that the problem is with the sensationalism. As do you remember that controversial IGN review?
Yes.
Which one?
Huh?
I asked you, do you remember that controversial IGN review? It was supposed to be a loaded question. It was supposed to tell me which one?
Yeah, which one? Sorry.
It's okay. I'm sorry. This has completely failed. The idea is that if I think of IGN or of GameSpot, I find it hard to think of a controversial review. Of a controversial score. If I think of Polygon, off the top of my head, I can think of at least four. The Last of Us, the Bayonetta 2, Dragon Crown, the Codename Steam, that they are very frequently accused of giving sensationalist reviews. If you go look at the guidelines for the sensationalism emblem, it says that it is subjective to an extent and explains the factors that determine the most likelihood that something is filed as a sensationalist. One of the first is the fact that something is widely regarded as an example of sensationalism. If you go look on the internet, search Bayonetta 2 Polygon, it has elicited a tremendous amount of discussion. And if you go to the Polygon Facebook page, they themselves say a lot of people are angry about the Bayonetta review.
Can I challenge you on that then? Because I do think that there is a pertinent question here about that. Is a website allowed to, if a website assesses a game and determines a game isn't as good as everyone else says it is, are they not allowed to give a game a low score?
They absolutely should. A different score is most of the time something very positive. It is a very thank you for the output, by the way. It is usually very positive to have a different opinion from the rest of the reviewers. What is the issue with the JICE review is that the impression that one gets from the is that it has been attempted to give this score for the sake of generating clicks. It appears not to be. For comparison, if you go look, there is one review on Metacritic that is scored the same. I think it's on the Financial Post. It is called the same as JICE, and it has generated no amount of criticism, no sensationalism. Nobody's talking about it. There's a review that is even lower, a 60 on a Czech newspaper. That one hasn't made any waves either. Furthermore,
but my question is, what makes the Polygon review sensationalist?
Sensationalist. It attacks the game for. It gives the appearance of taking a controversial stance for clicks. This is determined by the fact that it has been widely recognized. Once more, go look elsewhere. I link, I think, 3 or 4 places in the answer itself right now that discuss. I think 4 places that discuss the review itself. The review itself has become news. They discuss the review rather than the game itself. The Polygon has an history, as I've said, of releasing reviews that get this amount of they get this accusation. It's not the first time, the first or the only time it has ever happened. I link also in my post that these are not proof. These are impossible to prove that JICE was not sincere. There are a couple of things that seem to be, what's the name, indiciary of insincerity. For instance, the fact that Polygon gives has strong issues with sexism on Japanese games, but on Western games that are especially with games that are produced by people who have like Rockstar, who has been accused by Rich Stanton in 2011 of being very strongly pressuring reviewers. They have extremely positive scores with no complaints about their sexuality. I think there's enough indiciary evidence that this is suspicious enough of being manufactured for clicks that it will be worth noting. I've explained my reasoning in detail, and I plan to do that for every time something elicits controversy in the site.
Gotcha.
But either I change the guidelines for the sensationalism emblem, or if they are like that, that review is a perfect fit. Because I don't think there's any piece in the site that, with the exception that the emblems I gave to Hernandez and Kate Cox for the Temkin and Warner scandals. Specifically that fits the guidelines better than the Polygon reviews.
All right. Well, I have one last question about on the sensational aspect, and when it comes to game reviews and review scores, because in your opinion, is there a certain level of personal preference that cannot affect a review score? For instance, in the case of Bayonetta, as I recall correctly, about 1/3 of that article was dedicated to the fact that Bayonetta was a predominantly sexual female character in the game, and the author of that article didn't like that. Now, can that opinion have an influence on the score itself, is the question I have. Or is that strictly sensationalism?
This is a question that leave the sensationalism aside. My impression, again, we're on a subjective thing here, is that a vote, in and by itself, is an objective representation of a value. If an 8 is higher than a 7, a 0 is the lowest. It's the most objective thing you can do. Whereas the assertion that Bayonetta is sexist, not the fact that it has a sexy protagonist, the fact that it is that the sexuality in the game is portrayed in such a way that it is detrimental to the enjoyment of the game, is, in my opinion, extremely subjective. But the fact that you put it in the score gives it objectivity. If we go and look at it is pure speculation to say that Polygon's review without the sexism thing would be giving this score or another score. I have no idea. Nobody has an idea. But the average scores for Dragon Crown and Bayonetta 2 indicate that the review score has subtracted about between 1.5 and 2 points.
Right, but
which means, considering that both games are technically proficient, they're not broken, they're not unplayable. They are capable games. To
interrupt you, So, in your opinion, would you say that factors that are purely subjective should not affect a review score, whereas more objective standards, like, for instance, how well the game plays, how via controls, how many bugs does it have, how smooth is it, what the graphical fidelity is, etc. Should those be the only factors in a review score?
There are subjective factors, but the plot, for instance, against plot. I like this game's plot. This is subjective. This will influence my score. This is expected. If you play the same game, you will perhaps dislike the game, dislike this plot that I liked, and perhaps you will score it a little lower. That is understandable. The issue here is that the assessment that I like the assessment that of sexism that these reviews give is not just subjective. It is there's some people that will play the game and will feel no effect at all. I played Bayonetta 1. I am actually I'm surprisingly close politically to some of these journalists, and actually get very easily annoyed by sexism in games. For instance, I despise Other M, the Metroid game. Mixed by Boyle every time it gets mentioned. I was one of the people who was was not very happy about Zero Suit Samus being included in Smash Bros. You remember that created a little bit of controversy because she's supposed to be wearing her armor. The fact that you could strip it sounded like they were making her into sexualizing her. I was one of the. I've never criticized people for not liking that. I'm not going to impose my tastes on anybody, but I am normally affected by these things. a lot of the games that Anita suggests are games that I played and I have enjoyed. She will get a lot of hate from Gamergate or me, perhaps. I think they're terrible at hating people.
Bone Golem, you're breaking up a bit.
But the point is that I played Bayonetta and it had no effect. Dice, assuming that he actually had an issue with Bayonetta, which is something that is assuming not only that this issue would affect everybody, but it would affect them so much that the appearance is that it affects half the score. Because at 2 points, on a game that has gotten votes that go from 6 to 10, docking 2 points, again, it's apparently docking to 2 points, 1.5 in this case, 2 points in the case of Rindeau, I think, I don't remember the average for Dragon Crown, means that you're docking half the score of the game because of an aspect that could have absolutely no effect on some people. That is, in my opinion, as Clepac said, many people are giving him flack for that, but technically he's praising it correctly.
Well, if I can offer, like, before we move on to the next question, if I can, like, I think if I can sum up the reason why so many people have brought this up, I believe it's because I don't know if it can be proven if the game got a low score, specifically because the person who reviewed that game had an issue with the sexism aspect, or if there were other factors involved which affected the score. It's not something that's clear. This may or may not have been done as sensationalism, and I think that's why people have been bringing this particular one up.
Again, what I am doing is providing all information to make an informed choice. If there is a strong appearance that and it is impossible to have a certainty in this case, so the strong appearance is more than enough. If there is a strong appearance that this has been done for sexual, it is something that is worth noticing. If you are looking at this entry and saying this is not a problem for me, then go ahead. This is exactly what is expected of you. The site is function as intended.
All
I
right.
added recently the site for the disclaimer that comes out on the more subjective emblems and specifies that the emblems are based partially on subjective criteria and gives you a link to the specific emblem guidelines.
Bone Golem, there's a bit of technical difficulties on your end. Can you repeat that answer?
What about the I don't remember what I was saying.
I believe you were saying that basically that when you report
that pops out when the more subjective emblems are assigned, a specific sheet links you to the guidelines and explains that they're based partially on subjective criteria. So this is a start. If there is more feedback about this, I will perhaps mold it around, but I don't really consider the possibility of removing the sensationalism emblem for now. I consider that it is an important bit of the site, and it is important to point out things that I don't...
Gotcha. So basically, there are some cases where it's an appearance of some kind of unethical practice, but not necessarily the case, and the reader can decide. Whereas other entries are more clear, where there's a conflict of interest of some sort. Correct?
Sorta. As I said, it is also debatable that there is an ethical impropriety in these specific. It is information. Decide if a source is reliable. In this case, the issue being sincerity. If I see that Polygon has been called out so many times for giving reviews that cause a lot of backlash. I told you of 4 before. I just remember they also were called out often for their review of Killer is Dead. This is an appearance of something that is systematic and something that is much more. It's just appearance, but this is enough to note. For instance, the GameSpot, I believe it was, gave a 3 for Code End by Clover Studios. Remember that? That created a great deal of backlash, and again it was Code End on the PlayStation 2. I can think off the top of my head that there could be some cases of disputed reviews from GameSpot, to say a large website, but Right now, I can't think of anyone since the PlayStation 2 times that has been as controversial as Polygon review. You're getting my point.
Yes, yeah, I do. I'm not sure.
The issue is not that he disliked a game that I liked. Absolutely no. The issue is that the situation here gives the impression that the review, the reviews at Polygon in general may not be sincere. Once more, it is a possibility, but it is something that must be. That I think is notable enough for me to point it out if you ask me about Polygon.
But can that be determined based upon one review, though, or wouldn't that require a set series of reviews, such as like collating all the reviews of the website, and if there's a clear pattern towards a particular bias towards sensationalism, wouldn't that be the preponderance of evidence needed to determine that Polygon is giving unfavorable reviews for disingenuous reasons?
Of the various guidelines explained in the sensationalism emblem, the ones that are more the one that is once more there is no objective method to determine if something is sensationalist. So the biggest criteria I use is the fact that the review has generated a large backlash, and that a lot of people seem to consider it sensationalist. For instance, when I was researching the Penny Arcade report to write its outlet entry, the first thing you write when I wrote Penny Arcade report on Google, I got Penny Arcade report King of Fighters 13. I said, why? I checked, and the King of Fighters 13 was reviewed on Polygon. No, sorry, not on Polygon, on Penny Arcade report by Andrew Groen, with a review that accused it of racism, that accused it of several things, and had such a large resonance that when you look for it on Google, when I look for information on the Penny Arcade report, I was looking for the start. You get it for a good logo, for some. I learned how to search for a specific URL on archive.today that night. And I found that a lot of people were talking about the King of Fighters 13 review. That is something that generated such backlash that comments were closed. That Kuchero, when defending him on when defending Groen on Twitter, Kuchero was the editor in chief of the Penny Arcade report at the time. You get the idea. I tried to as little of my stuff as I can on the site.
To sum up your point, would you say that the determination, the criteria for reporting a journalist for sensationalism is dependent upon the response by the readership? And if so, does that exactly speak of the actions of the journalist, or does that only speak of the actions of the public?
I have no idea. I have to. If we believe that sensationalism is something worthwhile to note, we need to. Due to the three general criteria, the I have to be as invisible as possible. Ideally, I should be able to finish up the guidelines well enough, flesh them out well enough that I can hand the site over to you, and you can write exactly the same stuff I write, because the intervention of the author should be minimal. It should be as objective as possible. The emblem specifically admits that it is the least objective one, but it does the best that it can to get objective criteria. What could be objective criteria? The as objective as possible means looking at the public's opinion is not, as you said, as flaws, but it would have much bigger flaws to use my judgment. Because my judgment is my judgment. If I were to tell you this guy seems insincere, I would have to be. You're basing it on my opinion, basing it on the people's opinion. May not be perfect, but it's better than basing it on mine. It is more objective. Also, there are other guidelines, not certainly just the people's opinion. The fact that sorry.
Okay, so basically, there's no clear way to prove sensationalism, so the only way you can actually measure it is based upon public reaction. However, the question becomes then, is that a fault? Does that say anything of the intentions of the people that wrote something that comes across as sensationalist? Is it possible that some of the backlash these website publications they have received, which may indeed have generated traffic for them, were not deliberately sensationalist in many cases, such as giving Bayonetta 2 a low score?
It is possible in some cases, and that's why we are on the side of we are on the side of caution. This is why instead of, if you ask somebody on a forum, they probably tell you that the of several cases of the right now the reviews that are listed as sensationalist are just 3 on the whole website. Certainly, I'm not listing a lot of reviews that have lower scores. I'm not listing the 8.8 that Jeff Sherstman gave to Wind Waker, because not Wind Waker, sorry, the Twilight Princess, I believe it was. GameSpot gave an 8.8 to one Zelda game, and that generated a good deal of backlash. But nobody was accusing them of sensationalism. They were accusing them of they were accusing the game of not being as good, or they were complaining. I don't remember what they were doing, but they were not. I don't remember what they did, but since I don't believe that I haven't read the review, but I am fairly convinced that he was not that Justin was not complaining about the Link's skirt. I think that that these so I don't know where I was going with this.
That's all right. I think we spent way too much time on this one particular question, although it was, we did get a lot of interesting thoughts on this, because the subject of review scores is often a sticky issue with a lot of people, especially people involved in the consumer revolt, and not everyone agrees on what point the objectivity ends and the subjectivity begins.
I have added recently a new section on the advanced guidelines of the tweet that specifically lists.
Bongo, I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying. Could you repeat that?
I apologize. We have discussed it before. I don't know where the microphone is. I have recently added to Deep Freeze a button on the. I'm sorry, a button on the advanced guidelines. There's a section now that lists all the most controversial emblems, and for those emblems, right now there's only 2, but it's expected to grow. For the most controversial decisions, I am going to post the whole somewhere detailed reasoning, and then to put it publicly available there, so that people can see my reasoning and form their own opinion more easily.
Got it. Now, follow-up question. Not follow-up question, but to move on to a new question, if I can, unless you have something you want to say about the. All right. There's also been an interesting thing I've noticed on the website is there's a lot of people that are marked as non-journalist, and there doesn't seem to be a strict set of criteria of who can be documented on deep freeze and who cannot be documented in deep freeze. For example, in your interview with forgive me if I'm not pronouncing his name correctly.
I can't pronounce it either. It's not an Italian word. Mainoscan, I believe.
Yes. In the interview, you said that you only cover mainstream media journalists and non-journalists. Can you clarify that?
No, that I don't cover those. There's a principle that is now outlined. It wasn't outlined at the start of the site. A lot of people have seem to have a misunderstanding on that. The principle is that the freeze is going to be attempting to a sort of equality principle. If there's a reasonable doubt that I can't cover a certain subject properly, I will not cover it at all. For instance, I have not covered the Rolling Stone rape story because it is American mainstream media. I'm not familiar with the American mainstream media, the English language mainstream media, and I would have a trouble giving it the same scrutiny that I give to video game media. There's a reasonable doubt that if I catch somebody lying, say, about Gamergate on mainstream media, there's a good chance that I wouldn't be able to catch them lying with the same ease about if they spoke about Barack Obama. So it would be fairer to not go in that place. There's an exception that is made to this rule. This is what gets people confused. For scandals that are video game scandals. Video game journalism scandals are, for clarity, when they involve mainstream media journalists, they are filed also on mainstream media journalists or non-journalists. For instance, the Max Temkin story, which is very much basically a man that right now is being called a rapist everywhere. If you go look at Max Temkin rapist on Twitter, you will find him being called a rapist, and it can be visible on the story, or the following of that story is covered on my site on the Quick and Dirty article in the middle, and that Max Temkin's accusations that there's absolutely there's no proof that he was a rapist. He actually says, and is never denied by the person who accuses him, that he has never had sex with this person. So there's a strong, well, at the very least, there's a strong appearance of innocence. Max Temkin has been covered by Patricia Hernandez on Kotaku, very famously. She got an emblem for that. He was also covered on Rock Paper Shotgun by Rob Florence, and he was also covered by Valivag by Sam Biddle, and on Jezebel by Kelly Frocklatch. Now I have two choices here. Either I only give the emblem to the game journalists Florence and Hernandez, or I give it to everyone who covered the story. In the same way, it is deemed that it is less unfair to give the same towards Hernandez and towards it's deemed that it is less that it would be more unfair if I were to give the emblem to just the game journalists, but not the mainstream journalists who have done the exact same thing, than it is to break the rule that says that I can't that I would rather not cover mainstream media journalists. Therefore, when somebody does something in a gaming related scandal, they get covered. The majority of non-journalists and former journalists and mainstream media journalists that are on deep freeze right now are coming from the Game Journal Pros.
Gotcha. Can I expand on that? Can I ask a question? Sorry to interrupt, but it's
just a sentence. If I were to cover only the people in game journalism that are Game Journal Pros, I would get it will look completely very strange. But why is Ben Kuchera listed as a Game Journal Pros, but not Eric Eckstein from? It is you can see how it would be strange. So in this case, I make an exception. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. To extrapolate on your point, basically, you don't cover mainstream journalists unless it involves a story that started from non-mainstream journalists. Am I reading that correctly?
I don't cover mainstream unless they are involved in a scandal that involves gaming journalism.
Gotcha. All right. On that related question.
More or less, it could be broken for some reason. Certainly, if we ever start to cover mainstream media, it will there will be in the transaction phase a lot of discrepancy.
Gotcha.
This is more or less what we're trying to do.
Okay. Can you qualify what you mean by a mainstream journalist as opposed to a non-mainstream journalist?
Well, in general, if you could call him a game journalist, it's a game journalist. It's if we speak about somebody who writes habitually on a gaming site or or somebody who I'm thinking of fringe cases now. You're making me think about.
No, to expand, like, when is a journalist mainstream? Outside, like, gaming journalists, I know is a big focus of deepfreeze.it, but what about mainstream versus non-mainstream? This is the thing. Like, for instance, you said the Rolling Stone story wouldn't be covered because it's not because it specifically is mainstream journalism, and I believe you've also said that Milo Yiannopoulos falls in that same category.
I've said this on Reddit. I don't consider him to be a. That would have been a good example. Yes, he's technically, in my opinion, not a game journalist. I wouldn't call him a game journalist if I was to introduce him to you. I wouldn't say game journalist Milo Yiannopoulos. You would imagine that if I told you game journalist Milo Yiannopoulos, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, you will think he works at IGN or something to that effect. He does not. He works at a mainstream media outlet. He has made 2 reviews in his life. I haven't read them, but I remember that the Dragon Age Inquisition review used, I believe, was I skimmed it. I think I remember that it was a very clearly parodistic effort. And it made I know another review of a game that it was appeared into, but it was.
Golem, you're breaking up again.
He's technically not a gaming journalist. I mean, most of his coverage is not about games.
So then, can I ask if Deep Freeze is about journalism, period, or is it about games journalism specifically?
As I write on the site, and in the interview, right now it covers only gaming journalism. It would be nice in the future for it to cover mainstream media journalism, but it is something that somewhere that it must go without me, because I don't have the skill to. I don't have an incredible group of very determined and very skilled people who have devoted a lot of time in finding out things about gaming journalism. I don't have those people behind me when I work about. If I were to work about mainstream media, forgive my terrible English and phrasing.
It's fine. It's all right. It's just that once again you're muffled, I believe.
Hold it a second. I can try to get closer to the mic, but this might cause some strange actions. Give me a minute. If I get off, I'll get back on. Okay, maybe. Hello.
Hello.
You there?
Did you fix that? Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes. All right. Yes, I can. All right. Let me just couple of follow-up questions in regards to this topic. First one being, what qualifies a not what you first off, what qualifies someone to be a non-journalist, and if someone isn't a journalist, how do they get mentioned on Deep Freeze It exactly? And also in regards to this, I've noticed that writer Arthur Chu has been listed as a non-journalist. Can you clarify both of these things?
Where's the? I may get muffled again because I don't know where the mic is. Am I muffled more here, or am I more muffled here?
The last one, you sound clear, most clear.
Okay, then the mic. We found the mic. It's on the top of the tablet.
No. There, you're muffled. I'm not sure exactly which part of the tablet you're speaking into, but that.
You hear me better now?
Absolutely, yes. Now I can.
Therefore, it's on the bottom of the tablet. Yep. Now, I start holding it, and you tell me, no, now you're muffled again.
Yeah, these things happen. Don't worry about it.
Well,
to repeat the question,
is listed as non-journalist. I don't understand. I believe, I honestly haven't researched very far, but he's a contributor. He writes somewhere once in a while, like Salon and the Daily Beast. That has changed name now that I don't remember what it's called. But he's technically not. He's given profession. He's not journalist. I believe that he's given. When somebody speaks about Arthur Chu, usually he's referred to as a Jeopardy champion, Arthur Chu. I believe that he's It's not his journalist is not his given profession. It's not how he.
Bone Golem, you're breaking up again. I'm not sure whether or not it's an issue with your microphone or it's your connection.
Okay. The people on must be getting crazy. Okay, I'll keep it at a mid-distance and scream. Let's hope this works. Am I muffled? Is it coming up?
You're coming in good.
Okay then.
All right.
I will. It's worth it.
Okay. I believe that Arthur, to address what you're saying, I believe Arthur Chu is doesn't really get press passes or review copies, but he's a blogger. Is that the distinction you're making by non-journalist?
No, absolutely. Blogger works. He's as no journalist is the only way to fire somebody who's not technically a journalist, like Andrew Groen is a writer. He's written a book. Right now he's introduced. If you were to speak about Andrew Groen, we would say the author of this book, Andrew Groen. So to file him as writer is technically in the listed as non-journalist. After two, I believe that at some point I was thinking of calling him as something as a main job, something else, but I haven't researched what the other job would be.
So essentially, it doesn't matter whether or not they're a writer. It matters what.
I was going to file him as a Jeopardy champion, but then I introduced a notes section. Now, if you go on his sheet, you see a note that says that he's a former journalist, Jeopardy champion, but he's still listed as no journalist because I thought it was going to be his title instead of his of an annotation. Now I remember. Yeah, you're right. It should be corrected so that he's listed as salon contributor or something to that effect. But what's more, Chu is listed on the site specifically.
Bone, you're not coming clearly right now. Is there any chance you can get like a headset or a microphone that you can plug into your tablet and then communicate that way?
No, I'm probably covering. I'm guessing the microphone. Sometimes I'm gonna just put it back on this thing. So I'm sure since the problem has started when I detach the keyboard, and I'm going to assume that we are not using the tablet directly and I'm not touching it. I hope this works. If it doesn't work, go look for the headset.
All right.
Sorry about. I told you that there was going to be issues with this. I'm sadly.
Yeah, you did warn me about that, but let's.
Well, Arthur Chu specifically has written about one scandal that I don't remember. I believe he's written about tanking. He's made one of the scandalistic articles on tanking, and has written one of the Gamers Are Dead articles. So he's listed exactly for those two things. So he's, despite the fact that he's not, it's not because he's an enemy of Gamergate. I don't care. He's listed because he's participated in these two scandals. It would be unfair to Like Alexander to list her as an author of Gamers Are Dead articles and not Arthur Chu. And it would be unfair if I were to list, I believe once more it was written on the Temkin scandal, if I get, no, it's Temkin. And it would be unfair to Rob Florence to list Rob Florence because of his article on the Max Temkin scandal, but not Chu. So he's listed for those two. Specifically, it's not about the fact that he's against him, it is done, is that only not be freeze and does other things on listed for taping is listed as well. If it was a list of enemies of Gamergate, it would include a lot of people.
I'm Bone Golem. That last sentence didn't come through. Could you repeat that last sentence, please?
If Deep Freeze was a list of enemies of Gamergate, I'm not going to do any more streams because I'm reading this for you and I'm very sorry. If this site was a list of enemies of Gamergate, it would list a lot of futile people. Futile, that was not right on me. It would list a lot of people that are not that it's not listing. It is not a list of enemies of Gamergate. It tends to be as objective as possible, because I believe that the issues that we have can be objectively stated.
Gotcha, but I think we're going on a bit of a tangent with the particular point you're raising. My question is, like, when is a person who is a writer or someone who's when is someone considered a non-journal? When is a non-journalist susceptible to being listed on deep freeze?
I already told you. When this person has participated in a scandal that has got somebody else has gotten an emblem for doing the same thing,
Gotcha.
specifically about the same thing. The overwhelming majority of the non-journalists and ex-journalists that are listed right now are members of Game Journal Pros.
Mm-hmm.
If I list one member of Game Journal Pros, I'm listing everyone.
So essentially, those who are known to be complicit in an ethical violation of journalistic integrity can be are susceptible to being listed on deep freeze.
The same guidelines explain it in detail. If the specific ethical violation, as in an article on the Max Temkin scandal, or the participation in that specific mailing list has listed somebody else, and it is deemed that it will be more unfair to not list everyone who did that, then it will be they are not listed because they have made one ethical violation. They have there's something in what they've done that elicits the makes me feel that it would be information from people. Being a member of the Interpol is not an ethical violation, but an extremely long term of time.
Bone Golem, you're not coming through again.
Again, what the hell am I doing?
I don't know what it is. Is it possibly a connection issue?
I have. It is possible, yes. It makes sense. I'll try to run a ping in the background here. That will make sense because it seems not to be dependent on what the tablet is doing. I may have to interrupt the stream temporarily to go and murder some roommate.
All right. Well, we've been having a lot of technical difficulties today. Like, if you prefer, we could do this another. We could reschedule a stream for another time. Although I would like to.
My connection seems to be going splendidly.
Okay.
If it's an issue for you, we could do this. I could disconnect now, re-click on the link that you gave me, and rejoin the stream. With the
would that resolve the technical issues that we've been having so far?
I have absolutely no idea where the technical issues are coming from, and I think it's worth a try. It'll be a completely different device.
All right. We will try that. What you can also do is just hit refresh on the stream itself. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm disconnecting now, okay?
Okie doke. See you soon. While we wait for Bone Golem, if anyone has any questions in the chat, just put them now, and I will ask him them when he gets back. Or if you have any questions for me while we wait, that'll be fine as well. Again, I apologize for dead air. There's unexpected technical difficulties that I didn't anticipate. Bone Golem's microphone was having issues, so he's trying to see if refreshing the stream will help. He should be back momentarily. Hello? Welcome, and Bone Golem's come back. Hello? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello. Okay, it was asking me if it could use my microphone, and now it is allowed.
Excellent.
I think the volume is low, maybe, or is it working well?
No, I can hear you very well. I think this works out much better. This works out much better. I
asked you when we tested last time if you were hearing me well, and you said you were.
Yes.
Now
yes, I did, and I'm hearing you, and you're coming in clear now. Is what I'm saying.
Okay then.
All right. Okay, so I believe the last question. Okay, so I believe the last question we asked was about non-journalists, and you explained that non-journalists were writers or other people who participated in unethical breaches alongside the journalists, correct? Like if per chance
Once more, I don't like the use of the term technical breaches because, for instance, Game Journal Pro's membership is not in and by itself an ethical breach. It is something that is, in my opinion, useful for people who want to form an opinion.
Gotcha.
And saying it like this sounds like every violation of every violation. You're disabling the microphone every time I talk. Interesting.
No, that's only just because that's just...
No. I understand why. It's interesting. The way you make it sounds like it's something that everything anyone does is listed. It is not, because right now I don't have the power or the capability to keep up with so many sources. I am fairly confident in my knowledge of non-mainstream of video game specialist media, but not enough on the when people are involved in a video game journalism scandal. That will be the thing, basically.
Gotcha. All right. All right. There's one more last question on this topic. YouTubers, when do they qualify as journalists? In your opinion, are they susceptible to the same ethical standards as, say, that we want to have gaming websites to have, or do you think that they should have a different set of standards, or do you think that that's not a concern of Deep Freeze It?
For the time being, I have not asked myself this question. It will be interesting to do eventually, but right now I am not very familiar with YouTubers, so I wouldn't be able to cover them properly. Another issue is that while I don't know where I was going with this. Well, to be interesting perhaps in the future, I know that there are a couple of people that will be interesting to file as YouTubers, but right now it is not in the immediate plans, at least. Right now, the only YouTuber that is listed on the feed is, I believe, it's called Super Bunny Hop, because he was a member of Game Journal Pros. And once more, I can't single out people. The only people that are wearing Game Journal Pros and are not currently filed are William Asher and Ryan Smith, which one of the two is a whistleblower in Game Journal Pros, and the other was, I originally believed he was a whistleblower as well. I will have to add them too, and I have not done that yet.
Okay. Moving on to a new question. I've noticed that there has been a varied response from the journalists themselves in response to Deep Freeze It. What is your opinion on the general reaction? What is your opinion on the negative reaction to it? Like, a lot of people have been just trying to discredit your efforts, your works, who you've listed as, who you've listed on the website.
I just made a quick shrug. Actually, a lot of journalists have attempting to criticize the site, even those who were just looking for excuses to criticize it. I brought up some valid points, and on the valid points, I've tried to act. I've mostly have added a very long list of advanced guidelines, explanation of the criteria I've been using this far, and I have added a few.
So you've listened to feedback and you've made some changes based on
yes. Right now some of the criticism, as I said, that even that the one that was not legitimate was actually latching on the problems that the site actually had, and still has to an extent, and blowing them out of proportion. So those things were addressed. The reaction of journalists was as anticipated, a little bit. There were also some journalists that were specifically very. For instance, I had a couple of nice conversations with James Fudge on Twitter. He's fairly critical, but he's bringing up good points. the negative criticism that it has received was expected, and it is just the one that says it is a neat list. You know the idea. It's something that I expected, and I find quite humorous. Right now, they are in the curious situation, journalists, that that they can't criticize the freeze, at least they give it more traffic, and they can't sue the freeze. Not that I am afraid of a lawsuit, because everything that is written is well sourced, and it clearly states that what it is attempting to accomplish. It's not claiming that. It's not. There's not a point to the site the suggestion that anybody in that list should be fired or should be not read. The worst it says is look at this before reading.
Right.
But if they were to sue, they will give me such an insane traffic boost that is. So the people that are talking against it are actually giving it more traffic. So not really anything to complain about. Not that I gain any money out of it, but always nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree that it would be it's kind of like a lose-lose for them if they if they don't condemn it, if they don't respond, then they look bad. But
to an extent, it is also a pity, because I maybe have made there may be some legitimate mistakes. There's a couple of emblems actually right now on Ben Kuchera's sheet that are probably wrong. He has a corruption emblem for backing a Kickstarter without disclosing it, and he's the only one who has an emblem like that right now. Either I have to do it for everyone who backs a Kickstarter, or I have to remove his emblem. I am currently brainstorming with people what they would like to
now
file.
To be specific, did he back this a Kickstarter that he reported on, or
he backed he reported a Kickstarter? He reported on something without disclosing the fact that he was backing it on Kickstarter.
Gotcha. So that would be, yes, that would be a very clear conflict of interest right there.
Well, that is a debate. It is to an extent debatable. The Kickstarters many times act like pre-orders. So I'm not sure. In this case, I was not very doubtful, because you had given $100 to something that honestly I yet to understand what is. Sports friends, I don't know what that is. Doesn't appear to be playable. And $100 sounds like it's not the minimum pledge. I mean, it would be a different thing. Say if he backed for instance, Chris Grant has backed the Ouya Kickstarter, but I'm not sure really yet if it should be filed. Some people seem to feel it should be filed. Some people feel that it would be excessive. I don't know. I'm on the fence on that, and it will be debated.
All right. In this question of response from journalists actually does bring up a very good follow-up question to this. Will you be offering a right of reply for anyone listed on the website? For instance, let's just say that Ben Kuchera actually does want to set the record straight on why he backed that Kickstarter and actually send you an email. Would you publish that email to the website?
The problem with this specific account, probably yes. I would certainly link it to his to the emblem in question, and if the emblem either breaks the guidelines or the guidelines are deemed to be unfair, there will be changes. Either the emblem will be refiled. I've recently refiled a few emblems. For instance, following a change to the sensationalism guidelines. James Fudge, who had a sensationalism emblem, has had it refiled as a trivia emblem, and I would certainly accept any feedback. Once more,
what I mean is a right of reply is when you make when a news outlet makes an accusation or publishes.
I get what I mean. Yes, it will be certainly linked, as I said. So if Kuchera sent me a letter and spoke about it, I certainly would do. If you go look at when there is a reply, and I am aware of it, it's always linked as well as the entry. For instance, if you go look at I filed it last night, Lauren Wainwright has gotten a dishonesty emblem for stating that that she had never worked. She had a conflict of interest with Square Enix. she stated that she had never worked. No, wait. She stated that she had worked for Square Enix, but had never reviewed their games. She had actually reviewed many times their games, and they were always lavish reviews. So she got a dishonesty emblem for that. And I haven't not only linked the article that explained that by Eric Kane, I also linked the article by Stephen Totilo, where she's interviewed that speaks about that. So yes, very much yes. People are supposed to form their own opinion. I must give the information. That is why, if you go look at the Deep Freeze contact form, it explicitly states that the information that is sent through private meanings, like email or Twitter direct messages, may be used for, may be published if it is relevant to a Deep Freeze guideline. If Kuchera published sent me an email, I would immediately publish it. No questions asked, even if the emblem is absolutely, certainly, it is still relevant information to form your opinion.
All right. And another question in regards to the response from journalists is, while many journalists have been critical of what you've been doing by documenting these instances and cases where the journalists have not been working in service to the readership, there has been an interesting counter trend by at least two journalists. Georgina Young.
No, go ahead.
Yes,
I didn't understand the word that you said. Counter trend.
Sorry, let me rephrase that. There's been another type of response from journalists, specifically from Georgina Young and Miles Yiannopoulos. Now, these two have both said on Twitter that if they have committed an ethical breach or violation, that they would want to be listed on the website. Does this compromise your ability to objectively report on them?
It is possible. I have said in a Reddit thread that if it comes to, say, Georgina Young, I have the bias the size of the Eiffel Tower. It's supposed to be as little it's not supposed to be a gigantic problem, because I look at the guidelines and apply them if they are there, and don't apply them if they don't apply. But I will, in the interest of fairness, because once more, there is an acknowledged bias. I will do the best I can, and I will do like the Jai's emblem and publish an in-depth review of the specific thing, and explain why it is deemed a violation or not. Especially if it is not deemed a violation, because there's an appearance that because I want more eyes on that, and I want people to be able to see my reasoning and tell me if I have been biased or not.
Gotcha. But the specific question in this context isn't about like a predisposed bias. You may like one journalist over another journalist in general. But in this particular context, I mean, if a journalist were to come to you and say, because you're essentially acting as a watchdog, and a journalist were to come to you pointing out an ethical breach they made, could this be used as the appearance to appear ethical by trying to by bringing up some minor example or something like that, and involuntarily vouching for it to reduce skepticism from their readership onto them?
I don't really. I haven't thought of these like that, honestly. I'm guessing it could, but I don't see a colossal problem with that. As I've written in the new sensationalism guidelines, I've been on the fence for a while, and I decided to phrase them like this: when there's an apology that has a higher resonance than the problem, then it is considered more likely that it will be fixed. For instance, when James Fudge wrote the article on Brad Wardell about the accusations that the now widely known to be false accusations that Brad Wardell had gotten, he has made a short article following the much more widely seen Kotaku article. His apology was extremely widely, was an article that was a lot longer, explained in detail everything about the case, explained in detail why specifically he made that mistake, and was sincerely and strongly apologetic. The Wardle, as if you go look at his tweets to Fudge, is appears to be extremely to have more than accepted his apology, and I believe that the fact that Fudge apologized has had more resonance and has been seen more frequently. There are more people that have seen this article and realized that Wardle was that Wardle's accusations were fake than there were people who seen the original article and, in my opinion, and who thought thought Wardle was guilty, in my opinion. So I think so that has caused the change of the emblem. If somebody points out one of their failings, it is probably taken into account. I will try not to let that influence me in this specific occasion, and I will try to be strict with Georgina Young. But
gotcha. But the reason I ask this is because it could be possible that a journalist who has committed an ethical violation is self-reporting specifically to get on the website as a means to basically as a means to raise their own profile. One gives the appearance of ethicality by putting out some apology of a wrongdoing that maybe no one even would have brought up before, and it also is at the same time it could be it also puts them on a website that people will be specifically going to check out which journalist publications are have how many ethical violations, which ones are in better standing. So if a reporter self-vouches, they would also be listed in the article itself, and it could be used as a means to gain the system.
Interesting. No, I have never thought of that like this. I have actually, this is not a problem that I believe will be so strong, because those journalists who are not blocking me already have certainly not made many efforts to contact me. So not really seeing much of a problem with this. But should it happen, I will try to adapt to that. The guidelines have been refined a couple of times already, and I will certainly try to do that. When Birch, as Anthony Birch, has filed himself, as stated that he had received a favorable coverage from friends back when he was a writer for Borderlands 2, I have listed the fact that he has self-denounced. That wouldn't have been an issue anyway, because he is on the receiving end of chronism in this case. So he has been listed as a trivia emblem without much thought. But but it will be if it becomes a problem, I will try to address it. You bring a good point.
All right. On a related note, it's been another issue with Deep Freeze It that people have brought up is what prevents Deep Freeze It from becoming a means to pressure publications to write how the people behind Deep Freeze want, as opposed to writing ethically. For example, what's to prevent someone from using a Deep Freeze It or a website like Deep Freeze It as a means of like saying, hey, if you don't write a certain way or don't do something, we might have to do a write up on this, that, and the other thing. Not saying that, not trying to accuse you of anything doing anything untoward, but is there any, or I'm not trying to levy any kind of accusations, because I don't believe that's
no, I understand it. It is an interesting point, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm very much banking on the fact that journalists will see Deep Freeze and think strongly about what they are doing, because right now there is something that disincentivates them to do things that they were doing before, such as, say, attempting to generate outrage with, for clicks, or to just ignore conflicts of interest, that kind of thing. I don't really think at this point any of the Deep Freeze emblems pushes towards a bad thing. I will also say that when I started publishing updates about the development of Deep Freeze on Twitter, I've been pointed out to another similar website that the one that I mentioned before, the one that had all the explanation about the political biases and all. One, I think every website actually is, to an extent, including the journalist websites that we are dealing with, is actually pushing towards a certain thing. I mean, there are certainly a lot of developers that are thinking right now, okay, I would like to do this controversial thing, but then Polygon will write about me negatively. Polygon to say one thing at random. The difference is that it frees sanctions mostly ethical improprieties, and when not ethical improprieties, things that are still fairly significant. And if it starts taking biases, it will be hurting its credibility. So I think that it could be a problem for if other sites similar to the freeze pop out. It could become a problem if I become corrupted by power. Corrupted by power. And or if but so far people have been extremely proactive in calling me out when there was something that they weren't agreeing with. I've been I would certainly have, if I became evil, I would find hundreds of thousands of well-motivated people that have so far done a lot to spread the Deep Freeze, and done a lot to suggest improvements to it, have done a lot to find out information that has been used in it. They would very quick to call me out on it, I hope.
If I'm interpreting correctly, is this to say that when you is this to say that your accountability is up to the public to this up to the public readership to decide, i.e., like if
I would guess so, yes.
Okay.
Once more, I supply information that is filed according to as objective as possible criteria, and is provided with the explicit intent of being taken critically. So I'm doing all I can to be objective, and the guidelines are explicitly addressing issues with journalism, not rather than addressing political bias or other arbitrary things. I feel that this will be. I feel that we are taking good steps toward avoiding that. If we don't manage that, hopefully people will call us out on that and put us down like we deserve, because it already makes little sense for a website like Deep Freeze to exist. It only makes sense in the context of an incredibly corrupt industry that has continuously refused calls for reform, that has insistently labeled people were attempting to improve it as harassers or worse. If there wasn't such a terrible problem in the industry that there's people with who have 24 entries. Once more, some people may debate the entries. They may say this is I don't think this is an ethical impropriety. Yeah, I think the fact that they baked this Kickstarter is not such a big deal. But they can't. Even the things that you don't think are ethical improprieties are probably something on the fence. There's people who have over 20 entries. Like Alexander has 17 counted emblems plus 7 trivia emblems, so she gets to 20. 24, yes.
Right. And a lot of these, and there is a lot of ethical discussions and there is a lot of discussions on ethics in journalism and what constitutes as an ethical violation and what doesn't constitute as an ethical violation. Even beyond games journalism and professional journalism, there's a lot of these discussions as well. It's not something that is as clear-cut as what one may think. Some things are very clear-cut, such as accepting a donation from a subject you're reporting on that would pose a clear conflict of interest. Other things, such as a political slant or a bias, that is not as clear-cut. That's kind of what I myself know about this, considering the response I received from one article I wrote, but that's neither here nor there. But I do believe it's important to stress that what you're, well, I personally believe that's important to stress that it's not just a conflict of interest that is proven. It's also the appearance of a conflict of interest and the appearance of an ethical impropriety.
Much more, as I perfectly agree. That is something that is exactly what I'm filing. Unless there's significant, I'm not. That's why I keep insisting that I'm not filing ethical violations. I'm filing relevant information to form your own opinion, because I am. When there's something that seems relevant to the reader, I have to file it.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, you're presenting the evidence which would suggest an ethical impropriety, not necessarily reporting an ethical impropriety in of itself.
Precisely. There's also the fact that some emblems are explicitly stated to be more subjective than others.
Okay. Then there was also, I believe there's 2 more questions, and then we'll take some questions from the chat.
Okay.
The first one is, I've noticed that under trivia you have listed, under trivia, in your trivia section, you've listed people who have gotten drawings by Alejandro
Godano, yes.
Yes, I don't think I can pronounce that artist's name, but he's the famous Gamergate artist who's made red and blue images of various people involved in Gamergate.
And in my case, colored illustrations, because the Nito First of the Dead illustration that you see is my entry in the series. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. Well, my question is this an important trivia section entry to put down?
The first thing that the moment I put the first screen cap on V with on Twitter, which also added the portrait, there was the artist himself told me that it made no sense for it to be there. So we can see the point. I like these drawings, and I think they're interesting. They're interesting to put there. I believe that besides the fact that they are nice, and I like pointing them out when I can, I think they also have one fairly relevant role in the fact that they show that this person was involved in Gamergate somehow. Involved enough that so people that can see it and say, okay, maybe since this person was involved in Gamergate, there could be some bias on the part of the author, or maybe there could be some reason why this person has more entries than some other. I don't know. I thought that that would be relevant. If there's many people who call for them to be removed, I will remove them. At the Fritz launch, there were 2 people. It was a huge mistake on my part. I wanted to have really solved, and I apologize strongly for. There were 2 people whose only entry was the fact that they had a drawing. One of these persons was Anthony Birch. Now, Anthony Birch would never have been filed unless for the fact that he has one conflict of interest. That he has written an article about Saints Row 4, praising Saints Row 4, without disclosing the fact that he was involved in this game, and he participated into it, and he worked for it as a voice actor for his own character that appeared in the game. And the fact that specific conflict of interest though was not filed when the site went up, so that was a pretty huge mistake, because people were thinking that I have the file that Birch was filed because he had the portrait. That's absolutely wrong. So that has been solved, and I strongly apologize for that. There were also entries that were empty, For instance, when the site was launched, there were filed already Philippa War and Brandon Kilg were both filed with an empty sheet because they had not committed because they had been assured that was a stupid move on my part again, because they had been listed and they had a blank sheet because I hadn't listed their improprieties yet. But people were convinced that since by random chance Purge has actually been drawn, so he has an emblem for a trivia emblem for the fact that he has a portrait. People were thinking that the misunderstanding this entry, and very rightfully misunderstanding it. So this has been cleared now because Birch's entry is now full.
Gotcha. And also on the second question before we take some questions from the chat is, what of on the support list? The support list has been heavily criticized by many people.
I get it a lot.
Yes, many people do not agree that offering something that is called an ethical alternative is the smartest of moves to make. The reason being that websites really can't prove they're ethical. They can only show it by doing their due diligence, and it's ultimately for the public to decide whether or not they're a good news outlet or not. It also, just because you're ethical doesn't reflect quality as well. So, for instance, you may be in very good ethical standing, but the quality of your reporting or the quality of your writing may be lacking as well. Is there a reason? What is your reasoning that you have done the support list, and have you taken the feedback people have been giving you in consideration of making any possible changes, or is this something that you think is fine and can remain as is?
Well, the original idea that I had for the freeze was that it was supposed to work with a sister site, let's say, that would have been the construction, let's say, to the freeze's destruction. I was hoping that I would be able to create an aggregator. Just give me a second. I drink a lot. I was hoping to create an aggregator of the website that are now starting up and are creating an alternative to the currently heavily compromised media. And this website is too difficult to develop, and so this project has been, at least for the time being, abandoned. And I have brought to finish the project that is not monetized, and not monetizable. The other one is that is very good thing. I decided to make basically a shorter version of that in the ethical alternatives issue. Right now, the on-page blurb is a bit ugly, and it should be remade. And right now, in the all guidelines that I've linked you, the supported and boycotted criteria are not listed yet. I have not gotten around to filing them, but basically I list something as supported or boycotted based on a series of sources. Once more, I can't give my own opinion. I give it as little as I can. So I picked up a few sources. I believe 5 or 6 sources. I have a LibreOffice calc file that with a series of sources that provided outlets supported by Gamergate. This is deemed to be the most. It's not outlets that support Gamergate. It's outlets that are supported by Gamergate. For instance, a couple of these list Hardcore Gaming 101, which I've been a fairly avid reader of myself, who's a webmaster, who has been a Gamasutra contributor, has said very nice things about Gamergate, but the site in and by itself is into support lists. So it's not a matter of whenever you support Gamergate or not. It's a matter of whenever Gamergate lists you as supported or not. This is
right. A question on that specifically. Gamergate is still of so many different differing voices and opinions on everything pretty much. It's not, no one's, it's far from a collective of some sort. It's really hard to gauge consensus of like where everyone stands on the issues, and that includes journalistic outlets and publications. As an example, many people are still not happy with The Escapist. This isn't a majority opinion, but it is still an opinion within amongst people who use the hashtag. So when you say that when on the support list, when you say GamerGate supports or boycotts or has no or is neutral on a website, how exactly do you gauge whether or not this is how do you gauge whether, what does that mean exactly?
Well, the moment I start putting my own opinion in that decision is the moment that if you forgive my French, the shit starts flying. I have to be as objective and as detached from this selection as I can. I have picked a few sources that I have opened the wrong list. There's a list of I picked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lists. One from the wiki, one from the GitGood website, from a few infographics, etc. And I've taken the Gamergate.me or Gamergate.me, the one with the blue logo with 2 G's. I've taken all these lists and evaluated them. And if a website is listed as reported in more than a certain number of these lists, I deem that the website is supported. If this website is present on a boycotted list, boycott overrides. There's only one website that will qualify as supported, but is listed as boycotted. Elsewhere, it's Shack News. If they are between a certain number of mentions and mentions as supported, and they are and a certain other number of mentions as supported, I can arbitrarily, if there is other sources that prove this website is supported, I can arbitrarily add it as supported as well. This is the arbitration I have.
Gotcha. So
if I go and look at this list, I see that, for instance, Attack on Gaming is a 5 out of 5. All lists I have checked have it as a supported website. I haven't gotten around to filing it. I haven't gotten around to filing Blues News either. There's also another thing that is subjective. I check if the website is, as you said, provides quality coverage. I check if it is at least notable enough that it doesn't look abandoned. It doesn't look like it has been updated last time in 2011. It looks like it has been seeing a relevant amount of effort, a relevant amount of traffic. It is sort of navigatable and stuff. If I go and look at Christ Center Gamer is a 4 out of 4. It is perfectly qualified. If I go at The Escapist, I'm pretty sure, I think I remember that, what the hell is The Escapist? I think it's listed under the, here it is, 5 out of 5. Every single list lists The Escapist. 5, there's no, it's listed as supported everywhere I checked. As well as does Niche Gamer or Touch Raptor. All the websites that I've listed as supported. The only exception is no, wait, there was that I have placed my arbitration on is One Angry Gamer. I don't remember how many. It has only 2. It is only listed 2 times, but it has been listed as supported on Kotaku in Action.
Okay, so
I will clarify when I make an arbitrary decision, when I make these guidelines, which I was more and not finished. The biggest mistake I made with Deep Freeze Spy is not finalizing these guidelines before launch, so a lot of people got confused.
Okay, so there is an objective process you go through based on information you gather via Twitter, Reddit, other websites that have made up their support lists.
Basically.
Okay, and your opinion is only you, and your opinion is next to your opinion is not regarded in that decision. So it's a reflection upon what the communities of Gamergate have decided in aggregate, not above anything else.
Once more, as with the other thing that we discussed before, it is deemed to be much more objective to do something like that than to rely on my own opinion. I realize that this might be biased. I realize that this may be having issues. I also have realized that a lot of this makes it very hard for certain websites to be listed. For instance, mainstream media websites are rarely listed on both boycotted and supported lists. So this makes it hard for people to. There will be a new guideline undertaken for supported or boycotted mainstream media websites. Right now, this is an issue that I have. I don't have a value, which is why the Telegraph, for instance, is listed as neutral. It's neutral because it is not listed as boycotted anywhere. I can't make I am aware that the Telegraph is very much against Gamergate, and there's there will be good reasons to list it as boycotted. But the lists that I use as a base do not list it as boycotted. Engageit also. Engageit.
Gotcha.
Engageit does not list. You got the idea.
All right. But there is this does lead into an interesting point, and there's a reason why I actually brought the Escapist specifically. The Escapist, as it stands now, has more entries than many of the other boycott websites. Yet it is supported. In addition, I know that there's some conflicts of interest that were brought up in Indefensible, not yet I'm not sure if you're going to add them to the freeze or not. But
right now, the launch has been overwhelming. I have been very busy writing guidelines, and so I have never written any entry this far that wasn't already planned when the site was out. The only entries that I've already were adding a new entry is actually a pretty time-consuming process, because I have often to look up the journalist's career, find his photo. If there are outlets that are not that he has worked at that are deemed relevant enough to file, I have to file these outlets, find the logos, find write a brief history, discover when they were founded, when they were make a synthesize a good list, because I don't copy Wikipedia necessarily. I look for information that is. I copy Wikipedia a lot, basically, but yes, if there's something, I don't just tape it. If there are,
the reason why I bring this up is because if a website, if the website is deemed support or boycott on the list, and it has so much more baggage attached to it.
I was getting to that. The Escapist right now has a fairly large number of entries, but if you go look at them right now, beside that, as you said, there have been some other conflicts of interest that have been highlighted. I'm going to look at them. I haven't looked at Indefensible since the first couple of videos a few months back, so I got to catch up on that as well. But these will be filed normally. There's nothing that excuses them. But the Escapist right now has a very large entry count. But if you go look at it, the overwhelming majority of these is Game Journal Pro's memberships, which is understandable, as like IGN, the Escapist has a lot of freelancers, and the list has a lot of freelancers. The fact that it has using the entries as a method of filing is risky, because a lot of outlets have very low counts, simply for the fact that they are not very notable. If we went by the listings, for instance, without opening the website, just going by memory, quarter to three. Have you ever heard of quarter to three? I don't think you did. Would be listed with, I believe, just one entry or zero. I don't remember, maybe, but because it has it is very small and very little notable. There's you're getting the idea. It will be more a judgment of the little notability of the site than of the. There's a session that I've added now that you can easily see a link for it if you go proposingly looking at some journalist who has worked at Kotaku, Rock Paper Shotgun, or Gamasutra or Polygon. Mm-hmm. And you get a blurb that links to it that explains this thing, that if a larger website may be subject to more scrutiny, because if somebody writes a clickbait review, we talked about the JICE review earlier. The Bayonetta 2 has received also a 60 review on a small Czech website, apparently, that also criticizes it for its sexism. I haven't read the website. I don't know if it is if it will be the guidelines, but it probably wouldn't be filed anyway, because the website is so small that I will be giving it more clicks if I filed it now. Then I will be giving it shame if I were to. I don't know if you get the idea.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. The only thing is that it seems it just would come across as odd to a reader, in my opinion. It would come across as odd to a reader to look at the support list and see a website with a bunch of entries being supported by quote unquote by Gamergate, and then they see another website being boycotted with far fewer entries. This is what it comes across to me when I look at the supported and boycotted list.
Then I should consider doing taking some effort about it. Where's the Escapist? Escapist right now does not have that many entries. It only has 4. And let's see if I guess correctly, but I think they're all Game Journal Pros. Precisely. All Game Journal Pros, and I think the majority of these are filed as... No, they're not. They are all actually working at the Escapist. I thought they were freelancers. Yeah. They are all Game Journal Pros memberships. I have already acknowledged that the Game Journal Pros memberships are a bit odd in the website, as in, while there's a very good reason that for people to be filed, for me to think that it is relevant enough to mention in somebody's sheet, there's I think it's a serious I think it's a list worth addressing, the fact that the people who are engaged on the process are the only people who have been listed on the site without having done literally anything.
Actually, I have if I can offer, I have actually heard someone mention why that is actually a violation of itself, because in that mailing list, we have evidence that people were actually doing corrupt, ethically corrupt action, taking a part of ethically corrupt actions. Now, this means, by extension, the journalists who were part of that list were also present for when those dealings were happening. So, according to the SPJ, by not reporting corruption, they were violating their own ethical standards by not blowing the whistle on it.
I have to agree with that, but you have to remember that if we go and list everyone in the list, we will have to list also William Asher, who has, I have already written the guidelines. He will be listed with a trivia emblem because he's a whistleblower. But for instance, if we go at Ryan Smith, every sample of the list that we have shows very clearly that Ryan Smith was universally loaded in the list. He got lynched every time he tried to talk, apparently, from what we can see. I don't know if every thread we don't see is acting like a complete douchebag, and so people are irked by that. But he does not. He has, as somebody on Twitter rightfully commented, what he has done is the opposite of collusion, and it will be listed by objective guidelines. Plus, if we believe Jason Venter from Honest Game, who is currently the editor-in-chief of Honest Gamers and a freelancer and was a member of the list and he spoke about it, there was a very large number of people in the list that were not participating into anything, as in they went to the list, made a couple of posts, and stopped appearing. It's not very fair to file them as members of the list. I see that point that you made, and it's exactly the same point I have made in my writing. It's not so much the fact that there were improprieties in the list, is that they appear to be taken. Nobody in the list is calling them out, but at least the people who have been. I've tried hard so far to ask a couple of ex-former members if they had a list of the people who were there who had made very low post counts, but it appears that there's either there's none available or they don't want to share it. So I am a bit struck there.
Gotcha. If I can, and also in the case of William Usher, would you say that because he was, so in the case of William Usher, you're saying that he shouldn't be listed because he blew the whistle on the list. Does that, in your opinion, then, does that forgive the time that he was there for like about a year, I believe.
1 year and a half, and yes, I believe it is an objective criteria. What's a singular of criteria? It is an objective thing that sets him apart from the rest of the list. But I don't really like it a lot because it is assume guilt on the part of everybody else and accept another person. It's a bit strange. It's supposed to be the other way around.
So
I am going to file him as trivia because being a whistleblower of the list is one of the two criteria. The other one being the low activity in the list that I have singled out for people to be filed as trivia instead of collusion. But right now, it will be the only one to qualify. There's another whistleblower in the list, but we don't know his identity.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the fact that also, as I said, I have never managed to find out if there's a way to find people who have low post counts. That looks a little bad because it will be different if while the guideline is still in effect and it could be applied in the future. Filing has not been filed yet, but it will be filed. Finding just William Asher as trivia rather than everybody sounds a little bit. Would be better to file more people, if you get what I mean. And that is a problem of people like Ryan Smith, where
Gotcha.
Ryan Smith is much more extreme. It's absolutely certain that it's very hard to make a case that he was actually participating in collusion in the list, but still, this taking him out would mean that I am taking a personal stance based on. I'm going to crowdsource that. To hear the public what they say, if they think that it would be better to file him as trivia anyway. But right now I'm leaning on collusion, and it would be a colossal pity. I hope that I can manage to find some way to deal better with the Game Journal Pros emblems, because they are right now a bit diluting the rest of the list.
Right. So the concern is severity of the entry for being there, because not all members of the Game Journal Pros email list necessarily were as guilty as one another. For instance, the ones that advocated for blacklisting Brad Wardell and Alistair Pinsoft may not have been the same. Is not necessarily reflective of everyone, because it's the difference between being a bystander and someone who actually participated in the events, correct?
No, not really. The fact that once more it is relevant, the list, because the list has been accused of groupthink. Let me find the quote, because I think it is very interesting to read it directly. This is what Brian Smith himself has written. In my year and a half in the group, I was often the only dissenting opinion in specific topics, and most of the time I got totally ignored. Sometimes I was criticized or told I was off topic. I was warned that I was creating a hostile environment to specific people for disagreeing with them in an unapologetic way. And a couple of times I was told I'd be kicked out of the group. The informal pressure to fall in line with the groupthink was very strong. He also goes on to say that when he started discussing with the people in Gamergate, and then fledgling Gamergate, he got threatened by people in the list. He's not saying Ben Kuchera, but I am saying that he was Ben Kuchera, because there's fairly overwhelming evidence that there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that seems to point to Ben Kuchera. That we know that he has 4 harassment entries, and I believe every one of them is about him calling out, him contacting somebody's employer trying to get him fired.
Yes, I actually saw that one happen at the time. I was astounded that he would actually have done that, regardless, I think we've gone on a little. We've gone a lot longer than I expected. Part of which was due to technical difficulties. Part of which was due to my own fault. You
didn't expect me to have such a verbal diarrhea that every time you bring up anything, I stand on it for forever and ever. I try to be throughout. I try to be.
No, it's fine. No, actually, I was actually criticizing myself again, because I don't like it when I think I could have planned things out better, and probably should have given you the questions ahead of time for future reference. But Anyway, I will be taking some
both
questions for
learning something.
Yeah.
We're both learning something. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah. Regardless, I would like to, if there's any questions the chat has for Bone Golem while he's still here, before we wrap up, I'd like to if you just go ahead and then put them down.
Okay, go and look at them. I'll be right back.
Okie doke.
10 seconds, okay?
Okie doke. All right. While we wait for Bone Golem, if you have any questions for me, that'll be fine. All right. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. All right. That was a very astute statement. It wasn't. That's not a meme at all. Have you received anything telling you to take the site down? That'll be when Bone Golem gets that back. I will ask him that. Again, if you have any, while we wait, if you have any, I'll just. All right. Since there doesn't appear to be any questions in the meantime, I'll be closing down the stream soon. I just want Bone Golem to come back in and offer his final thoughts. Okay. Someone asked about an honor roll system. Would you be interested if you scroll up? Blah, blah, blah. All right. And any plans to expand the site staff? Gotcha. Again, I apologize. Bone Golem had to go ahead and get something. Hold on one moment, please.
Here I am.
Back.
I'm sorry. As I said, I drink a lot when I talk. So
it's all right. It'll probably.
It was a very needed break.
All right. Well, we do have some questions. Some people offered some questions while you were gone. Is there any plans to have an honor roll system on the website?
That will be very interesting. Honor, as in putting positive emblems, I believe you mean.
I believe that is the case. Well, let me just check.
That will be a very good thing. I would love to do that. The issue that we have discussed that in development several times. I've also discussed it in chat with Oliver Campbell, and he said he thought it was a good idea. The issue is that it will be very hard to find some way to do that. I was specifically thinking if I have to list somebody that has been mostly a good journalist, it would be nice to have some way to solve the issues. I mean, for instance, Rob Florence had an important role in the Doritos Gate. He has denounced the industry a lot, and it would be nice for that to counterbalance his bad emblem for his role in the Max Temkin scandal.
Well,
now the fact that he has been
offer a counterpoint to the idea of an honor roll system.
I was going to offer it myself and say that right now it is. I can't think of any objective way to properly file that. It is impossible. Even if we go by the best actions, a good journalist is not defined by the fact that once he was a whistleblower for something. In the majority of cases, it's not defined by the fact that once he did this amazing thing. Mostly, a good journalist is defined by the fact that he has never screwed up. He has followed the standards for all his life. so it is a little harder to actually find some way to properly put them together. And even if we were to single out a good, particularly significant events, such as taking a particularly pro-consumer stance in a scandal where most journalists have gone against the consumers, or the fact that they have implemented a new, better ethic policy, to be arbitrary to an extent. I don't know if you get the idea.
No, I understand what you're saying perfectly, because
your counterpoint was that, or what was your counterpoint?
It goes along the way on the lines of what you were saying. However, I was going to be more specific in that the journalistic ethics are pretty much a list of rules of things you're not supposed to do with your power, ways you're supposed to keep your power in check as a journalist, or rather your influence in check as a journalist, to be more specific than that. And when you're doing this, when you apply a rule that says do not do something, I don't think that you can. I think it's only a system of negatives. It's a matter of your credibility starts at 100% and then just slowly goes down. There's no really way to. I don't see a way that you can make yourself more ethical through actions. You make yourself more ethical by not doing bad things, not by doing good things. You can improve you can improve your quality of journalistic efforts and how well reported your story is, how good you are at asking interview questions, how well researched your article is, et cetera, so on and so forth. But when it comes to ethics, it's either you apply ethical standards to yourself or you break them. I mean, there isn't a way that I can really see you as putting in extra ethics into your journalistic career. So that would be my concern about the honor roll system.
Yeah, exactly the same issue I have. Right now, the system is not perfect either, because I'll take one example that I think is possible. Let's take Patricia Hernandez from Kotaku. Patricia Hernandez has a few chronism emblems and a couple of clickbait sensationalism emblems for a role in the Max Temkin scandal and another article she has written. One notable thing that she has is that every single conflict of interest she was found into was disclosed after the fact that it was discovered. When originally at the start of Gamergate, she was discovered to be in a conflict of interest with Anna Anthropy and Christine Love. She has had a disclosure to the articles and to the articles about Zoe Quinn that at the time had not been called out yet. And later, when she was discovered to be in a conflict of interest with GamerX, she also had a disclosure there. Also in the Max Temkin article that she wrote, that is listed by Codotile as well as one of his worst misfires in his history as editor-in-chief of Kotaku. She has a little after published a new version of the article, while keeping the original one up for transparency. Published a new version of the article that omits the most controversial bits. So let's suppose that in the future Patricia Hernandez stops doing anything wrong. Let us suppose that she is. How the hell does the tweets behave? Because right now there is no system to, and they are very. I think it's very difficult for us to determine a system that is objective for, like, I don't know, this number of years without getting an emblem. It will be. Some people may get that because of negligence on the part of the person that files, rather than by the fact that the journalist has actually started acting properly. But if she were to act ethically from this day forwards, she would still have 6 emblems, I believe. That this is something of an issue. As I said before, deep freeze only makes sense because we are acting in a situation where the situation was absolutely a disaster, and the game journalists have taken no effort to solve this. I clarify also that it's notable that Hernandez had the disclosure because In the meantime, Grayson hasn't to these conflicts of interest that are 10, not just I think they are 10, not just 4. So it is my impression that she added them on her call rather than was forced by Totilo, editor in chief, to add them. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. On the note of dates and like how many years they've gone through without an ethical violation or something like that. Perhaps the best way to resolve this is to simply put a date of when their last violation occurred, essentially. Like,
could be an idea, yes.
Yes. For instance,
they're not filed as with a date right now, but it would be possible to add it to the database. And I believe that every action is that is filed over there is actually dated.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not or could be reasonably dated with a reasonable amount of reasonably small mistake.
Right.
So I think it will be a good idea. Thanks for the tip, actually.
Yeah, that's just a suggestion. I don't mean to put. Yeah.
I listen to everything.
That's good. There are a few more questions in the chat. Let me just go through them. First one is, what is the funding? Someone Hexus 13th asks, what is the funding structure?
Funding structure is that I do all the work myself for free, and I pay for the site's hosting. That is an extremely cheap Italian hosting, out of my own pocket. And this far, there has been no effort been taken to secure any form of funding. I've spoken about it on the review on the interview that I made with the one that you mentioned before, with my Italian friend Minus Can. And the only I'm sorry, I got confused. The only thing that, as I say in that interview, I'm fairly okay financially. I don't. Everyone can use some more money, but for me to be it wouldn't be needed to pay the rent. It would be. To mean that I could update this horribly old gaming computer or get a new console, but I don't need it to live. And the hosting is pretty cheap. I can pay it for 10 years without even noticing it.
So the website serves as public interest in a way where you don't require or need any kind of donations or anything like that. And it's not asking. It's what's the correct terminology? It's not financially. It's self-sufficient, in other words, and doesn't require funding.
If it turns out that the site is gaining importance, if I think that it can be maintained reasonable, it can get a reasonable level of maintenance without me, say, quitting my job to go after it, I may consider some form of very carefully some form of donations to make it my day job, but I'm extremely reluctant because I live in Italy, so any funding that I receive would have to be converted in euro, and it would be and therefore it would be for people who live in America, the people who live in the rest of the world, it would be strongly devalued. People would take a lot out of the pocket to give me only a little. I don't really like the idea. So not so. If I'm no longer completely excluding it for the future, but if it will be something that I consider only if it comes out that there are no alternatives. If it's either leave the site to rot because I can't maintain it properly.
Gotcha.
Or it's also to be. I also consider, given that Gamergate has achieved a lot since its start, I'm not so certain that the freeze may, and consider that, as I said before, that site may need another daddy to go on to fight mainstream media. I think that it may be also not as long-lived as people think. So that it would no longer be important. I'm hopeful and confident that it will be game journalism may change in the coming few years enough that a site like that makes no longer any sense. And hopefully it can stay. It has achieved its purpose. It can quietly disappear.
All right. Cableman asks if you have any plans on expanding the staff beyond just yourself.
That will be very much the idea. For now, it is. There are a couple of issues, as the people would need to be chosen very carefully, and also it will be interesting to add some form of. Also, right now, the set suffers a lot from the fact that I'm not an actual programmer, and I've not actually made a proper interface. There's no backend in DeepFreeze right now. The only thing that is there is the only way to actually interact with the database is to use the hostings tools. So there's right now the MySQL database is only interacted with only a read-only account. I'm not so sure of how I should deal with it. I will, however, I'm very much considering though adding people. I have already a couple of people lined up. It would be nice to.
So you have plans to expand, but there's some technical speed bumps in the way. Yes,
technical, and also once more it will take somebody very carefully chosen, because if I keep a supervising role on everything, I know that everything is going to fit within a certain metrics that is not. If somebody else comes in, maybe there will be a point where we start arguing. Mm-hmm. I'm certain that a certain entry I filed will be filed always in the same way. I am not certain that the same guy may be filing the other guy that I had does the same thing. For instance, the person that has been helping me the most this far has been submitting to me the same entry a lot of times. I have looked at it quickly. I have not looked at it a lot, but it doesn't seem to me that it is. Actually, now that I think of it, it may have a point. This person may have a point. So it's a bad example, but let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that this person kept sending me an entry that doesn't fit. If I put this person in charge, this person will be filing things that are not into the guidelines. That is an issue that I have to be more careful than most sites with these things.
Mm-hmm. All right. I have just a couple final questions from me. Firstly, how do you...
Now I don't hear you.
Huh?
Now I don't hear you. Did you buy a tab like mine?
No, I didn't switch. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you well, yes.
Okay. Let's go on technical difficulty. Anyway, first, I'm going to close the stream soon. Just have a couple of closing questions. Firstly, if anyone has information concerning more ethical violations in gaming journalism, or perhaps other journalism as well, can they send it to you? And would you go over it?
I have a colossal backlog and right now to look at, and I will go over it so very much slowly. We are getting to the point where it may be there may be a case where I can't ever catch up with this backlog, and that, as I said, that could be the time when I have to either hire somebody or to actually consider dropping other things in my life to go after the freeze. But I have been looking at everything I've received this far. I'm going to look at everything, and I'm going to. The only thing I ask, because it will make my work much faster, is to either submit something that is in violation of the freeze guidelines, or to submit a change to the guidelines, because that's the way it's supposed to work, more or less. Is either it. I try to put the whole process down on paper as easy as clearly as possible, because it is a bit long. But it is not the thing that we are missing. Again, I keep getting lost, and I start a sentence and then I don't remember what it's Alzheimer's disease. It's finally caught up with me. What was I saying? The last thing I said.
I was asking about submission. People submitting entries to be considered.
Yes, I am. It's as the in theory, every entry should follow the guidelines. So it's either. So don't tell me this guy has done this and it should be filed. If it's not in the guidelines, it's not going to be filed. If it is in the, if you send me, I don't know. I haven't verified that, but there's somebody who has told me that I should add Milo Yiannopoulos for the fact that he has been accused. I haven't verified if these accusations were true. He has been accused of not paying employees. Even if that were true, and considering the sources I have been provided, and I don't think that I think I would have to look at it. It's just an example. It would not be filed. There's the fact that you murdered somebody or done something morally objectable is not a breach of journalistic ethics. What I am interested in is if something appears to be an issue that makes that should hurt the credibility of the journalist. If you go and look at like Alexander's sheet, there are several violations that were once filed under emblems and they have been moved to trivia. For instance, she has admitted to basically leaking her book to pirate sites. She got paid. Then they made something that offended her, the people who paid her, and so she leaked it so that they wouldn't get the money when she was already paid. That's something that is not really ethical, but it has been filed under trivia because it's technically not a violation of journalistic ethics, and also because I'm afraid that if I put any more violations on like the weight of her entry may sink the site like an anchor because she has already 3 million entries.
In summation, then any submissions for consideration have to actually meet the guidelines. It can't just be any form of ethical violations.
Or they should include an explanation of why they think the guidelines should be edited. I have edited several times, even after the site's launch.
So all right. Final question. Where do you see the future of the website headed to? I believe you alluded this to before, where you speculated that it may serve its purpose if gaming journalism specifically reforms, or it may go in, or you also speculate that it may go into a more broader ethical journalism perspective. Period. Which of these scenarios do you think is more likely, or do you think that well, actually, this is actually let me simplify it. Where do you see this future website going?
Well, the place I see it going is after it's been finalized well, after it has been run properly and maintained well, after it has been refining its guidelines. The place I see it going mostly is out of my hands, because because as I said, if it takes enough of a stride that it may be, and there is no other resource similar to it that surfaces, it may come to be a watchdog for journalism in general rather than just game journalism, and which is something that I think is very important, coming from a country that has been ruled for a long time by a person who has had ties with mafia, has been going through countless legal processes while governing the country and changing the law so that the processes no longer apply to him. Trials, not processes, trials. And that managed to get away with all of this for a very long time because he controlled basically 100% of the Italian press. It's I think it would be very important to see it, but once more, this is something that my knowledge, my skill, will not be able to handle on their own. As many people in Gamergate often say, I just wanted to play video games. I'm not. I was not looking to become the media watchdog, but I don't have the capabilities to do that.
So eventually, you'll pass the website to somebody else.
If somebody else that seems capable enough surfaces, and if there is still need for the website, possible. Or if there's some people who are saying things like, we need a deep freeze for these people. So it will be interesting to see if something else takes momentum. Once more, that would also be something that happens. So in that case, or even if something like that doesn't take place, doesn't take hold, but I can't manage to find somebody to continue running the freeze, it may simply cease to exist on its own once the situation with game journalism has been a little subsiding.
That's interesting, because I thought the idea behind deep freeze, in the name of it, or at least when I first heard the idea, was basically to have a permanent record of all the transgressions, so that essentially it would be a reminder of what they did, so that they can't, so that to prevent something like this from happening again. Yes,
this would be a good thing. Mm-hmm. But again, as I said previously, the site as it is right now only exists because it is existing in an extremely strange situation where there's tremendously widespread corruption and a complete refusal to address it. With people who are trying to address it, instead being labeled as horrible things, as more if we don't right now, it is doing something useful. It is good to see Ben Kuchera sheet and see all he has done in one place. But if you go look at it in detail, as I said, there's no system in place for forgiveness. There's only the sensationalism emblem that has something to that effect, which covers mistakes and sensationalistic journalists. There's no system in place for people who have gone without offenses for a long time. There's no system in place. I am not accountable. I am. Nobody knows who I am. I'm not intending to give my identity anywhere. I am intended to be. I have been raised on 4chan with the anonymous culture. I think that anonymity has its importance. I think that it to an extent is a shield. I don't know if I told you, but yeah, I told you yesterday. I have accepted your Steam, but later I have reflected, and I thought it was not a very good idea to do that. I should be invisible. I shouldn't exist. I shouldn't exist. I should be. I don't consider the idea of putting one's identity. This is a personal thing, not something that I don't consider. I consider it that you are evaluated for what you do, not for what you are. My work should speak for itself. I probably won't accept other teams after this one, for this reason. I am already feeling very guilty when I participate in threads about Gamergate that I almost always, since I started developing the freeze, I have had to participate as the person who runs the freeze, who was developing, and now the person that runs the freeze. I can't participate anonymously because normally when I go there, it's because I'm asking something about the freeze, or I am discussing the freeze in some other way. This is well, I have made a parenthesis on anonymity, but right now I am not a person that is accountable. This is an issue that the site has. If you go look at the details right now, there are a lot of smoke works. As I've said elsewhere, I'm like the plumber. I have waited for the plumber for a long time, and since the my kitchen kept getting flooded. I have made a makeshift tubing that has done more damage than good, maybe. I don't know, but it's only worthwhile. It would have been much preferable that the plumber, in this case the gaming press, had addressed the issue properly, or somebody that knows anything about journalism, because I am not exactly an authority on it. Would have fixed it, but the only it's good that I did this, because the alternative was that the kitchen would have been flooded. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that I make this. You understand the metaphor, or have I gotten lost in it?
I believe the exact metaphor that you're referring to was like you're the guy who goes in and the metaphor. Like I get what you're saying. Although the metaphor could use, I admittedly the metaphor could use a lot of work, but I get. I apologize. Yeah, it's fine. But basically, this is that your opinion of deep freeze is that it's not something that it should exist, but it has become necessary. Correct?
Well,
like if the journalists were, if the culture of corruption wasn't, if it weren't for the culture of corruption, there would be no need for deep freeze. But because the culture of corruption exists, the deep freeze becomes a necessity, because there's no accountability within.
I like the idea that there is something like this, but the fact that deep freeze should not exist, it should not exist because it is run by somebody who is not part of the journalists. It is run by somebody who has no idea what. Quite frequently, there's no idea what they're doing. I had no idea that the site would have gotten this much traffic. I expected only a few people to go there, only to be a additional resource for Gamergate participant, for people participating in Gamergate. Instead, it has gotten a lot of traffic. A lot of the people that were involved have talked about it. I was actually continuously saying in the threads that I couldn't wait for the freeze to launch, because I had time off after it launched. They picked up and tell me, okay, you're working hard. You do now take some time off, otherwise you'll go crazy. And I said, yes, I'll take time off when the freeze launches, because right now it's almost finished. I'll finish it and then I'll take some time off. And then it launched, and everything that I done because I thought, okay, not many people are going to see that, has been heavily scrutinized. It has gotten a tremendous amount of traffic. There's been noticed by all the large Gamergate. Everyone in Gamergate is talking about it. And then Baldwin tweeted the site's address. When I told it to my sister, who is a huge fan of Adam Baldwin, she's swooned like the idea. And I did not expect this much. And the issue with it is the fact that once more it's amateurish. It's not. It's trying to do an important task, but it is not. It is strange that such an important task is undertaken by in such a way by an amateur that works alone, that nobody can find out. It's if it gets to have more importance, it's definitely strange. That's why as you said, it shouldn't exist. You paraphrase me. And that is the reason. One resource like this, properly made, will be very precious. Will be very precious. I'm not saying that something like this in and by itself is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in addition to a lot of scrutiny, I've also noticed that the response, even though there has been a lot of scrutiny, most people have given you, many people have given you a lot of praise, and even the people who are scrutinizing do so with the proviso that they do find a need for a service like this that you're providing. And even though I do, even though I have been even though many of my questions have been scrutinizing, I am of that disposition as well. I do think this resource is going to be very good for public interest in the future, regardless of the direction it goes into. And at the same time, what was it? And at the same time, if you think that you need a break after putting in this much effort, I don't think people would fault you if you disappear for a while and then came back after like a couple weeks or however you need. Although I do think that, I do still think that, that's my. response to that.
Well, thank you for that. The issue right now is that there are, every time I turn around for a minute, there's somebody launching another operation regarding deep freeze. There's been an operation that has been finishing posting right as we were preparing for the stream in the Gamergate HQ thread. That another operation that Gamergate is doing that involves deep freeze. There's a lot of things that deep freeze is not doing correctly. There's somebody in my I haven't gotten around to reading that thread, but there's somebody in the deep freeze dedicated HSAM board that's been made a SEO analysis, search engine optimization analysis of deep freeze, and I'm fairly sure is I've done a lot of wrong things over there because my SEO skills are coming from the early 2000s. And they weren't that developed back then. There's a lot of things to do right now. That's why I will very much take a break. Otherwise, Otherwise, I start going insane probably at this point because I've been at basically a non-stop crunch. The freezer started being developed in February, but before that I think I've had a few weeks where I was a little slowed down, but before those, I had the biggest infographic I made, the Monster to Silence. That one was a real chore to make. That took like a month of research, and but as you said, the response has been incredibly positive. People have been so showering me with love, with thanks, with I'm less happy about that and more surprised by that. I did not expect these. There's so much positivity, so much people thanking me, so much people begging me to give to let them give a hand financially. I'm very floored and very thankful for this response. I'm not very sure if I'm deserving of it even. But I did not expect it to blow up as it did. I expected a few people to see it, but seeing it, this was a big surprise for me. And I'm very happy with this response, and I'm very sorry about the fact that much more being alone, I have a lot of trouble staying, keeping up to date with things, checking all the feedback that I receive, responding properly to the people who point out things, and working in general on the properly rewarding these people's attention and thanks, but and with responses and also with proper and timely solving of the issues that deep freeze has right now. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. As usual, I keep going. Every time you ask anything, I go on a tangent. This is also one of the reasons why I'm so slow. I have a very hard time working to something. Doing something quick. I normally, every time somebody asks me a question, I need to go through every single detail until I have completely taken it down. Every time I write an article, I have to go through every single thing to make sure. Every time I do something, I have to. I'm not very good at doing things.
No, actually, I think that's. Actually, I do think that's why Deep Freeze was such a success, because you were very thorough with everything you've done, and you've gone through all the necessary leads and information, and also made necessary decisions in doing so. So actually, I think that's to your credit rather than something to hold against yourself. To
an extent, yes, it is not a negative thing, but if it is too much, it becomes a problem. As you've seen, I've stretched this interview This interview that was supposed to be an hour, I'm not faulting you. It was supposed to be an hour, has become, we are almost at 3 right now. And right. This is mostly because every time you have something, I can't stop. Everything continues forever.
Yeah.
I can't control myself. There are times when one is supposed to half-fast things or to try not to, or where you take too much effort in something, more effort in something than it's worth, and sometimes I do.
All right. Well, on that note, you're right. We don't have forever, and I do think it's a good place to end the stream now. I don't, even though this was this stream went much longer than intended. That's usually the case for a lot of the streams I do. There were some of the issues were like on my end. Really, I could have done some things to prepare better and stuff like that. But overall, I think it was a very good stream and it was enlightened for me and for the people listening on a lot of things. And this will be available in post. I may also actually edit out a lot of the flubs in between because there's some stretches of silence, etc. But otherwise,
I apologize for the bathroom break, and I apologize for the issues with the tablet. I'm really sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm glad. It was good having you on, and it was good talking with you. On that note, I'm going to close down the stream.
Okay, then. Thank you for having me, and good luck with your future work.
Thank you, and same to you as well. And
thank you.
And for those listening, be sure to check out deepfreeze.it, and there you can find a whole lot of documented cases of journalistic improprieties or the appearance thereof. Have a good night, everybody, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.